はい、皆さんこんばんは。Hello everyone. 配信がスタートしました。見えていますか？聞こえていますか？大丈夫ですか？ Can you see and hear us? If you can, please feel free to write in the chat. If you have any trouble viewing us, you can reload the page and that should hopefully fix it. OK。それでは、第37回英語シンポジウム、世界各地のハロウィンというテーマ、で、配信を開催したいと思います。本日司会を担当しますカフェトークスタッフのマリンと申します。My name is Madeline, and I will be your host today for this 37th English Symposium titled Halloween Across the World. 本日は、この2人の講師、が参加していただきます。テーマはこちらになります。Today we are joined by these two tutors who will talk about the following topics. まずはエイミー先生がアメリカでのハロウィンのお祝いについて教えてくれます。First, Amy will tell us about celebrations in the US. そしてその後は、アリソンさんが、スコットランドに伝わる怪談、について教えてくれます。Afterwards, Alison will tell us about ghost stories from Scotland. そして配信、中にコメントを書き込んでくださった方の中から抽選で今回参加する先生たちのレッスンに使える無料チケットが当たれます。コメント投稿お待ちしております。Participants who post comments during the live stream will be able to maybe win a free lesson ticket randomly. So if you want to win a ticket, don't miss the chance and leave a comment. そしてこのイベントは、10月中に行われるハロウィンキャンペーンの一部です。本日のライブ配信のあとキャンペーンページにある他のハロウィンをテーマにしたレッスンもぜひご覧ください。たくさんレッスンがあります。このプロフィールに出ているアリソン先生の、レッスンもそのキャンペーンの一つです。そしてハロウィンレッスンを受講するとプロフィールに特別なバッジがつきますので、それもぜひ楽しみにしてください。This event is part of the Halloween campaign in October. After today's live stream, please feel free to check out the other Halloween-themed lessons on the campaign page. For example, the lesson that is linked in Alison's profile here on the live stream is also part of that campaign. And if you do take a Halloween-themed lesson, you will see a special badge appear on your student profile. So if you do take a lesson, look forward to that as well. もし講師へのご質問やコメントがあれば、英語でも日本語でも大丈夫ですので、気軽に右側にある、チャットボックスからご送信ください。If you have any questions for the tutors or comments on their presentations, feel free to write it in the chat on the right side during the stream, and we'll talk about your questions after each presentation. 今日の配信は、後ほど無料でもう一度見ることも可能なので、途中から参加される方、もう一度ご覧になりたい方は、ぜひ数日後にもう一度キャンペーンページよりアーカイブをご覧ください。This live stream will also be available as a recording for free later, so if you can't watch the whole stream or if you want to watch it later again, please check out the campaign page in a few days to watch the recording. この無料配信を楽しみいただき、感謝の気持ちを込めて応援ポイントを送りたい方は、画面右側のメニューからいつでも送ることができます。ポイントは講師たちの間で、分配されます。If you enjoyed this free stream and you would like to show your appreciation by sending some thank you points to the tutors, you can do so via the menu on the right side of the screen. The points will be split up between tutors. それでは早速最初のプレゼンテーションを聞きたいと思います。Okay, let's get started with the first presentation. Amy, we can switch over to you whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Madeline, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today for the Halloween Symposium and Cafe Talk. As mentioned earlier, my name is Amy Miyabi, and I'll be presenting on how Halloween is celebrated in the United States. Let's switch. Okay. So before we begin, I just want to introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Japanese. As you can see, I was born in Japan, but I grew up living in both Japan and the United States. I actually ended up going to university and graduate school in America. And 2 years ago, I moved back to Japan to study at Itsumeikan for a second master's degree. And then my research is focused on psychology and international studies, such as cross-cultural communication. And I have been teaching English and Japanese for many years. And I've been teaching on platforms such as Cafe Talk, but also worked in schools in Japan and the United States as well. Just 2 months ago, I actually moved to the US again. I now live in San Francisco and I work for a university doing immigration services. And I specialize in study abroad support such as visa processing. So now my lessons on Cafe Talk are geared to not only people who have interest in different countries and learning languages, but also those who want support in going, doing international travel or study abroad. So I do more of a TOEFL and TOEIC, lesson-based plan as well. So enough about me. So I'm gonna now start our presentation on Halloween. So our agenda today is the following. So we'll be talking about the historical background of Halloween, what trick-or-treating is, how Halloween is celebrated in schools, and how intertwined Halloween is with social and entertainment industries. So going into the historical background of Halloween, the Celtic festival of Samhain, which is celebrated on October 31st, it marks the end of the harvest season and the onset of winter. Originating in ancient Celtic traditions, it was believed that on this night, the boundary between the living and the dead are blurred. And so because this is a time where spirits can cross into the world of the living, people will light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off spirits. Samhain also served as a time for feasting and honoring ancestors, and this sets the stage for many of the Halloween traditions that actually came about afterwards. So for example, there is a Christian celebration called All Hallows Eve that's also celebrated on October 31st, and this is the night before All Saints' Day. This celebrates the saints and martyrs in the Christian tradition, and the name All Hallows Eve reflects the significance of the deceased, and then the traditions are rooted also in the Celtic traditions that I just mentioned. Over time, this celebration has evolved into a festival where people wear costumes, trick or treat, and then also have spooky decorations. And then this shows how the practices, such as this Christian holiday, is really based off of this, this historical background of the Celtic traditions. The Irish and Scottish tradition of guising also involves children dressing up in costumes and going door to door to perform tricks and recite poems in exchange for treats. And this practice dates back to the ancient festival of Samhain, as I mentioned. And so, as I said, the Samhain tradition, people will wear costumes to ward off spirits. This is kind of like like a connection towards that culture. Guising not only allows children to partake in these, cultural practices, but also fosters a community spirit because it's an opportunity for kids to get together. So now I'm going to talk about trick-or-treat culture. So trick-or-treating is a cherished Halloween tradition here in the United States where children dress up in costumes and go door to door in neighborhoods asking for treats by going trick or treat. So the practice is they'll just go to a door and knock on it, and then when it opens, they'll say trick or treat and then receive candy. At each house, they'll receive all different sorts of things. So there's candies, but now the practice has evolved that sometimes they might receive small toys or, some different snacks. Many families will also decorate their homes with autumn-themed items such as pumpkins, and trick-or-treating is a highlight of Halloween. In this picture is actually pictures of my nieces and them, and they're you can see them wearing costumes such as superhero and princesses. And there's really no limitation as to what kind of costume you wear because it's a time to explore different identities and to really just have fun. So as you can see here, some people even dress up in groups. So let me see it right here. And then we also have like in here, so this is from the movie Inside Out. It's one of the Disney Pixar films, and you can see like this group of friends, they're dressed up as the characters of this film together. Then we also have this one. So this is actually my two dogs, and you can see that they're dressed up as characters from the Japanese anime Kimetsu no Yaiba. So they're dressed up. So my dogs, it's a boy and a girl. So we made them the Tanjiro and Nezuko from the anime series. In schools, Halloween is a day for students to have a themed party together. For example, students can wear their costumes to school, and there are parades where they can walk around the school or even walk around the neighborhood to show off their costumes. There's also a tradition of costume contests where people can vote on the best costumes or the most creative costumes or the silliest or the scariest costumes. And this is very nice because some people actually put in a lot of effort into their costumes every year, such as making them by hand. And then so you can see here, this is an example. This is actually my nephew's Halloween parade from his school. So you can see that it's not even on the school grounds. They actually walked around the neighborhood and you're able to take pictures. And then, the community members are able to also come out and, just applaud and, compliment the kids on their costumes. And then here's another example of, a more clear picture of like what a Halloween parade can look like for school. Okay, so the themed food, snacks, and decorations during the season are not limited to just schools, but also can be found in the community, such as inside restaurants and stores. And so what you're going to see here, so for example, this is a picture of a latte I had during one of the Halloween seasons in the past. And because pumpkin carving is one of the Halloween traditions, you can see my latte art was actually of carved pumpkins. And you can see here's some other examples of some, Halloween themed snacks that, you might see at like parties and such. Here's an example of just a simple Halloween decoration. So I know that, on social media, you might see more of the, more extravagant decorations of like cobwebs or like lights and such. But even during the season, you might see like even these simpler ones. And this is just a part of a way for stores or places to kind of get into the Halloween spirit. So, as I mentioned with the latte art, one of the traditions or activities during this season include pumpkin carving. There's also pumpkin painting and pumpkin picking, and there's contests where people can even vote on the best carved pumpkins or best painted pumpkins or like the largest pumpkin you pick at the field. And there's also haunted houses and haunted walks for those who like to get scared during this season. And, like I'm someone who personally doesn't like to get scared. I don't like horror films. I don't like anything of that nature. But even myself during my university days, in America, I even partaked in these activities because it's part of like the culture over here to, get together your friends and do these activities. So here's a photo of me and my family pumpkin picking actually. As you can see, it's just like a bunch of pumpkins out in the field and people will go out and try to pick the best one or like the best shaped ones or even the largest ones to go then to do pumpkin carving or pumpkin painting. And then here's my family. We were doing pumpkin painting in this photo here. And then you can see like, so it's very like, how should I say, like a very much of a family activity. So, you'll all get together on like a table and you all to paint your pumpkins together. And then you can all see what everyone comes up with afterwards. And then here's another example of pumpkins that my family has, carved or painted. So you can see like there's the one with all the flowers. So you can really just paint them in any way. And the one on the bottom right, I actually carved that myself a few years ago. I was trying to do the Simba from the Lion King image, and you can see that's how it turned out. So, there's really no limitation as to what kind of pumpkin you make. So now I'm going to go into the social and entertainment influence with Halloween. So it's really a time where people can get together and have fun with costumes, parties, and activities. And Halloween acts as a vibrant community bonding event. And in this way, social media, and the entertainment industry really influence on Halloween trends. But at the same time, it's also vice versa, where Halloween can also influence social media and the trends in pop culture at that time. In many neighborhoods, families also, as I mentioned earlier, they decorate their homes with spooky displays, and this creates an inviting atmosphere that encourages interaction. And in local events such as the pumpkin carving or the pumpkin picking or the Halloween fairs or haunted houses, it allows people to kind of like have an excuse to get together with their friends and family to do something fun together. Halloween can also be a time for charity fundraisers as well. So many organizations host themed events where admission fees and donations support charitable causes. This can be a themed party, a haunted house, or any kind of activity where it's run by volunteers and the money that they collect ends up getting donated. Some businesses would also get involved in these practices by hosting such events, or if a business is like giving some kind of promotion, like a Halloween themed, I don't know, design or something, they might donate a percentage of those causes to a charitable cause. And so these activities not only raise funding for certain causes, but it also promotes awareness, and this fosters a sense of community involvement. Halloween is a time for creativity, and this is influenced by media and pop culture. So, for example, how should I say? This holiday inspires like countless like costumes, decorations, and themed events. And because people have the opportunity to really just express themselves in any way possible, so movies, TV shows, social media, they all play a significant role in shaping what kind of Halloween themed parties or events or costumes are going to come out. So for example, like if there's like a popular show going on throughout the year, during Halloween, you might see a lot of people dressed up as characters from that show. And it's very interesting to think about how when you look at Halloween, pictures from the past, you have an idea of what shows came out or what movies were popular at that time. It kind of gives you a sense of what pop culture was during that year. Also, social media platforms like Instagram or TikTok are filled with creative DIY or do-it-yourself projects. So, like makeup tutorials on how to create a certain look or how to create a certain costume for those who create their costumes by hand. There's also recipes on how to make those Halloween themed snacks or like how to be creative in their design. This culture fosters a sense of community and allows people to inspire each other with different ideas and to show their uniqueness, right? And it's quite interesting to think about how Halloween is celebrated in this nature. So this concludes my presentation on Halloween in the United States. And again, my name is Amy Miyabi, and you can find me on Cafe Talk for language lessons and questions about international travel and study abroad. And I thank you so much for your long attention, and I will now pass it back to Madeline. Thank you so much, everyone.
I was muted. Of course, that would happen. Thank you so much, Amy. And we got some questions in the chat from students, and I also have some questions, but if the students still want to keep writing, then of course I will read even more. 3人の方からご質問いただいたんですが、もしまだ質問書いてない方もいればぜひ、今でも書いてください。もしいないなら私もたくさん質問あるのでいろいろ聞きたいと思います。So the first one is a student called Black Lemonade who asks, can children visit any house even if they are not familiar with them? So I guess if they don't know the people who live there.
Right. So that's actually a great question because if you think about like safety measures, like it's like, oh, like that's not very safe for you to go out to like different strangers' houses. But it's like very interesting. It's like Halloween is such like a community event. And obviously parents for their children, they'll accompany their children. So the kids are not just walking around the neighborhood going to random people's houses, but we do walk around to the whole community. So you might not know these people at the same time.
Okay, so it's also a nice way for people to maybe meet people in
Yes,
their neighborhood that they don't interact with much usually.
yes, I think so. Yes.
Ah, that's really nice. Yeah, the next question is from Kikusa. Pumpkin hunting looks great. How do you recognize good pumpkins?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I'm not a professional, but like I can think like what I like, when my family or like we tell our little ones, it's like so some people I think like the size. So like some of them look for like the biggest pumpkin or like the most round, perfect size. But if you have like, for those who are a little bit more unique or like, want to have more fun, they might like the pumpkins that are like shaped a little bit oddly and then they'll like be able to carve it in a certain way. So I mean, there's really no limitations. So that's why I think that it's so exciting when you're at the field and there's just like all different types of pumpkins and everyone just kind of scurries around and just looks for what suits them.
Nice. Is it difficult to carve the pumpkin? So like,
That's a
do you
great
have to be careful that it doesn't like something breaks off or?
right. I personally think it's difficult. That's why I prefer when everyone just does pumpkin painting because it's a little bit less work. You just take the paint and you just paint
Yeah.
the side of it, right? But pumpkin carving, I think the most difficult part is that you have to cut the top open and you have to scoop everything out,
Hmm.
because people will put like a light inside to make, as I showed in one of the photos. So especially like little ones, they don't like to go through that process. So the parents are like the ones who have to scoop out all the stuff, like so that the kids can then like start carving. And then because it's a pumpkin, like if you carve in the wrong way and it cracks or you make it too big or something, there's no going back. So I think it's
Hmm.
less forgiving than painting.
But I guess if you make something beautiful, then you're even more proud of yourself
I
because
guess
you
so.
made
Yes,
it.
that's a great way to say
Yeah. So tying in with that, student Autofam asks, do people eat pumpkins used for lanterns? So I guess the stuff that's inside, do you eat that later?
it.
Are they
That's
edible
a
pumpkins?
great question. Yes. So I'm not a baker, so I have not. But yes, I do know people who would take the insides of a pumpkin because you can see like people make like pumpkin pies or like pumpkin like I don't know pumpkin filled like goods in some way. So I think that's the way to use it. But I'm not a baker, so I can't give much more than that.
Okay. Yeah, let's see, what else did I write down? Um, yeah, one thing that just came up in my head when I was watching, especially the end of your presentation with all of the like movie characters and all of that, is kind of the opposite of that. That recently, in recent years in Japan, something became popular that's called Jimmy Halloween or like mundane Halloween, where people, for example, would dress up as like the person at the supermarket who forgot to bring their bag, so they're just carrying everything in their hand and it's like really awkward. So I was just wondering, do you think that would be popular in the US as well?
Oh, that's a great question. I can tell you though, when I was in Japan working for a little bit, students, especially the students from abroad, they thought it was so interesting. So I know some of the teachers, they'll actually like go on X, Twitter, like,
Yeah.
and then they'll like scroll and it's like, on the, how should like the projector board or whatever, and they will show the students like, oh, like this is like, these are costumes that, Japanese people have done this year. I
Hmm.
think it's hilarious. But like, I think it's such like a concept unique to like a place like Japan that I don't know how well it'll translate over here because America's just like so filled with like vibrant like movies and pop culture that I think like if you were to dress up as something like that, people would get a little bit confused.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, I love that. I love seeing the photos every year. And then the student Itagaki says, 違う国のハロウィンが楽しそう. So the Halloween in different countries looks really fun. So yeah, I agree. There's always, you see a little bit of the character of the people in that country through how they like celebrate things. So yeah, that's really
I think
fun.
that's very interesting. And also, I think it's also interesting to see, especially like for me, because I saw it very much in Japan and the US, how Halloween is celebrated. And kind of like the differences and like, as you were just mentioning, Madeline, like with the costumes in general, but like just like what kind of a tradition exists in each culture is very interesting to see. But, the roots are all the same. So, yeah.
Right, right. So my question to maybe both of you, what was your favorite costume as a child when you dressed up? Do you still remember that?
Yeah,
Alison, what's yours?
I love being a vampire.
Understandable, that's very good, yeah.
Yeah, because you get these wonderful big cloaks that you can go in, and everything is black makeup, and yeah, it's great fun.
And
Bit of
when you
blood
run, it's
dripping
like
down.
billowing behind you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I remember. Um, oh my gosh, it's such a. I just talked to someone about it, so that's why it's like so fresh in my mind. When I was very little, my mom and we came to the U.S. for a little bit, and I had to be still in like elementary school, and because I was living in Japan, I only knew Japanese shows. And I was so convinced I wanted to be the Ojamajo Odoremi-chan, like
Mhm.
it's a Japanese like TV show like about like witches, but like she's like all pink and like she like has like this little wand, and I was so certain I was gonna be her. And you cannot find that costume in the United States, so my mother had to ask our relatives in Japan to ship over a costume so I could wear it to school.
Aw.
And I was like, I just remembered though, like as a little one, like nobody knows the show. It's such a Japanese, like only like TV show, but like that was such like a great experience for me that like my family allowed me to be so extra in that nature.
That's so nice that they made such an effort to import the costume for you.
Exactly.
That's nice. I think mine was like a random character from a German children's book who's like a vagabond or something. Yeah, it's
Yes.
really, really random. Okay. Yeah, so let's move on and let's find out about Halloween ghost stories in Scotland then. To our person in the back, feel free to switch whenever.
Hello, welcome. As Amy was saying, all the different cultures tend to have the idea that there's a very thin veil between the worlds now, so that the past, the people who are dead, the people who are alive, they can interact with each other. So there's very often tradition of having a bonfire and then reading ghost stories around the bonfire. So I thought it'd be interesting to read you some ghost stories from Scotland. And then there's also one that I found. It's a new one that's been written about a ghost in Japan. So it'd be interesting to compare that with your own personal experiences with ghost stories from Japan. So let me start off by reading about Hurling Jean. In the 18th century, while on a tour of France, Mr. Stewart, a rich Scottish gentleman from Allenbank, met a young and beautiful French girl called Jean. It's going to be fun. He induced her to leave home and live with him for a time. Eventually, though, he tired of her and returned to Scotland and became engaged to a lady with a great fortune. But Jean was determined that he should not escape her so easily. She had sacrificed everything for him, her honor and her home. So she resolved to leave no stone unturned to discover his whereabouts. At last, her perseverance was rewarded, and she arrived at Allenbank without. The truth was then revealed to her. Her faithless lover was about to marry another. Despair gave her energy, and burning with indignation, she rushed to his house to confront him. She reached the gate just as he was about to leave in a carriage with his fiancée. With a cry of anguish, she jumped onto the front of the carriage and peered inside. Mr. Stewart was too astonished to react. How could she be there? He couldn't believe his eyes. The rapid beating of his guilty heart made him feel sick. He glanced fearfully at his fiancée. She must not find out the truth at any cost. Perhaps he had lost his head because his next action was more dastardly than any he had taken so far. There was not a second to lose. Jean's mouth was opening to speak, and she would reveal his secret. He waved at her to go away, but she remained in place. So he ordered the driver to start driving. As the wheels turned, Jean slipped. Her dress caught in the wheels, and she was crushed to death. Her fate did not make an impression on either Mr. Stewart or his fiancée, though, as they continued on their drive without stopping. The hauntings began in the autumn. Mr. Stewart was the first to see her, as was only right and proper, as he had caused her death. Returning home one evening, he perceived to his surprise the dark outline of a human figure perched on top of the gateway to his house, exactly opposite the spot where Jean had perished. Wondering who it could be, he leaned forward for a closer look. As the figure moved, an icy current of air ran through him, and he recognized Jean's face. She was staring down at him with bright glassy eyes, her cheeks pale white, her hair fluttering in the wind, her head and neck bathed in blood. Paralyzed with terror, Mr. Stewart could not move until one of his staff opened the carriage door and helped him out. The spell was broken as he ran into the house and locked the door behind him. After this, he had no peace. The great front doors would open and shut about at night, noises. The rustling of silk and sounds of footsteps were heard in the dark hallways between the bedrooms. Because she always wore a dress covered in lace and pearls, she was known as Pearling Jean. She was such a frequent apparition that the staff got used to seeing her around, and she never did them any harm. So here is another story of her appearance locally. The Haunted Orchard. The courting couples of the local village used to meet of an evening in an orchard near the Allen. One evening, a local boy, Thomas, came early for a rendezvous with his sweetheart and was sitting waiting for her when he saw a figure in the moonlight. Thinking it was his sweetheart, he rushed forward to give her a hug, only to watch the figure vanish from between his arms. An icy current of air passed through him, and the trees began to look dark and menacing. His imagination started filling the orchard with unknown horrors, and he fled as fast as he could. A few minutes later, his sweetheart arrived, but could find no sign of him. She waited for some time and wondered what could have happened. He'd never been late before. Hoping that nothing bad had happened, she went back to the house. The next morning, the truth came out, and the couple had a good laugh about the scare that Pearling Jean had given him. Now that it was daylight, it seemed easy to forget, and ultimately they got married and lived happily ever after. Here's a second story from Scotland called The Haunting at Hennersley. Hennersley being another name for an estate in Scotland. For many years, the elderly sisters Amelia and Deborah lived in a stately home called Hennersley. It had an unusual design, with a main building at the end of the long drive and one wing on the left, but no matching wing to balance the design on the right. Whenever I visited them, I wondered about that unusual arrangement. Was it a whim of the architect, or had part of the building been destroyed in a calamity? The question was often on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't dare ask them. The sisters were typical spinsters, enjoying life on the estate, and were not unusual in any way except for one. It seemed to me that rays of sunlight pouring in through the huge windows would follow them around the house. Sunshine filled the house, giving the air a golden glow, but a stronger sunbeam than the rest would land on the sisters. One day, the dining room where we were sitting enjoying our breakfast was permeated with the scent of flowers. I remarked on the lovely scent, and Amelia said, "Dear me, strange that you noticed that scent. It's something we do not like to talk about, for reasons that you would not understand." I was greatly puzzled. Why should this topic be forbidden, and what was the connection to the sunbeams? One day I decided to confront them. I asked Amelia, "You love the sunlight, don't you?" She replied, "What a strange question, child. Of course I love sunlight. Most people do. But sunbeams do not follow everyone around like they do you." "My dear, there are things that young girls cannot understand. Do not ask me any more questions." I obeyed her, but felt more and more that something strange was going on. At night, the cheerful house would get gloomy, long shadows would fill the rooms. It made me wonder if the place could be haunted. And then one night, as I was walking in the garden on the side of the house without a wing, a strange restlessness seized me. It seemed as if all the flowers in this part of the garden were white. Suddenly, a horrid shriek rang out, followed by a low wail. I sank to the ground and covered my ears with my hands when a girlish laugh reached me. The air around me became cold. I looked up and saw a building in front of me, with walls painted green and elegant furniture. In the middle stood a young and lovely girl with lots of golden hair and bright violet eyes, holding a bunch of scented flowers. As soon as she saw me, she fled, and the room disappeared from view. In the morning, I awoke back in my bed. At the breakfast table, I told the sisters of my dream, as I assumed it must have been. They were amazed, but finally decided to tell me the truth. What I had seen was the ghost of their sister Esther. There had been another wing on the house, with walls painted green and elegant furniture where she lived. Green was her favorite color, and she loved the scented flowers planted under her windows. She was a sweet person and dearly loved. One night, the house was broken into by burglars, and we were awakened by her shrieks. We all rushed to her room, but the door was locked, and by the time we got it open, she was dead, murdered by the burglars. They were never caught, but our mother had that part of the house pulled down in an attempt to forget that awful event. Since then, Esther has appeared to us as a sunbeam. Her beautiful spirit still wanders these halls, and occasionally she appears in dreams like yours. The house is haunted, but we enjoy having her around. So, not all ghost stories are scary. Now I've found this one on the internet. It has actually been written by a woman called Deborah Amar. You can find it on her website, deborahamar.com. But it's set in Japan, and I thought that would be of interest to us all, especially as a comparison to the Scottish ones. This is a ghost story by Deborah Amar that takes place in the Japanese countryside, which includes a visit from an unexpected ghostly guest, a yurei. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. These Japanese ghosts are known for having unfinished business when haunting in the earthly plane. I had been living in the Japanese countryside for nearly 3 months. Instead of staying in a traditional apartment, I was able to rent a small home in an area where neighbors were scattered somewhat far apart. Each night I slept very well, but one night I had an unexpected presence visit me. I could sense him at the foot of my bed. A yurei, a human ghost walking the earth, had entered my home. I used to be afraid of ghosts, but there was something about Japan that made spirits seem almost second nature to me. The yurei spoke to me in Japanese. "What would you wish of me?" I paused for a moment, remembering that wishes from the spirit world are never what they're cracked up to be. So instead I responded, "May I serve you a cup of tea?" After a brief moment of silence, the Yurie began to walk out of my room, and I followed him into the kitchen area where there were 3 chairs and a table. I turned toward the Yurie as I entered the kitchen. Since it is rather late in the evening, I will serve you hujicha. I then began preparing the hot water on the stove. Hujicha is a very light baked tea leaf that has minimal caffeine and a popular tea for the evening. I hoped it would be acceptable to my guest. I could feel the ghost watching me as I made the tea. He sat in the chair furthest from the kitchen, closer to the bedroom. I brought my small green tea set out, filled it with the now piping hot boiling water, and added the tea leaves. I set the tea on the table and began to serve my ghostly guest. He politely took the tea and began to drink. "What would you wish of me?" he began again. I thought for a moment and decided it would be better for me to treat the Yurie as a guest and play the part of the gracious hostess rather than truly answer what my wish would be. "You are a guest in my house. I could not make a wish from a guest in my house. What would you wish of me as my guest?" The ghost paused for a moment and then asked me, "Will you come with me to the forest?" I was taken aback by the question, and finally my fear began to kick in. I was fearful of what would await me on the way to the forest, or even in the forest itself. Still, being a polite hostess, I answered him. "Well, you see it's late now. I would have no protection against the things that wander in the night. I'm afraid that the outside night can be a little scary for me alone." This somehow seemed to make the ghost sit upright as though he were surprised. He then smiled at me and said, "Well then, in gratitude to my hostess, I will grant you that wish. You will have protection in the night from this night forward." A little frightened and worried, since I did not intend that to come across as a wish, I thanked the ghost for his thoughtfulness, but insisted he did not need to be so generous since he was a guest. What he said next, though, truly caught my curiosity. "There are the children of the wilderness that I know well. They will always watch after you in the night or in the day. They can sense when you need them. This is not my gift to you, but their gift to you. I am as a father to them." My curiosity overcame my fear, and after finishing our tea, I grabbed my coat and accompanied the ghost outside. We walked a short ways, and suddenly I felt a shiver of cold overwhelm me. The fear tingled all the way through my spine and made me want to run back to the house as quickly as possible. Suddenly I was approached by a fox that was a little taller than my knees. Surprised by being approached for the first time by a wild animal, I stopped for a moment. The fox seemed unafraid of me and looked right into my eyes. I turned toward the ghost, and he slightly bowed his head at me, as though telling me the fox was his gift. I continued to walk, and the fox walked alongside me. We were nearing the forest, and I began to fear again what awaited me within the shadows among the trees. In that moment, 2 tanuki that looked like raccoons approached me. I began to realize that these must be the children of the wilderness of which the ghost spoke. I felt less alone with the tanuki and the fox on either side of me and continued into the forest. It was pitch black when I entered. It was like walking into a dense fog or mist without seeing anything in front of me. Anyone with instincts would think to turn away from darkness like this, but somehow I felt safe and unafraid. There was a small glowing object deep into the forest. The ghost was clearly walking towards it. The animals clamored next to my legs, stopping me from walking for a moment. I couldn't tell why until I took another step and noticed the ground was much lower, and I would have tripped and fallen. Walking at pace with the ghost, the glowing object became larger as I approached it. Finally, I reached it and could see that it was a small shrine with fireflies floating around it. Atop the shrine was a small chipped teacup, similar to the ones I had just served at my table. The ghost turned towards me. "Do you remember when you came here?" he said. "I've not been here before," I answered in a low voice, almost speaking to myself. "You came here once before and offered me tea, yet you did not make a wish. I would like to hear your wish." Unsure how a teacup similar to mine made it all the way out into the forest, I decided to inspect it. I picked up the teacup and suddenly felt a chill down my spine. I could see that the teacup perfectly matched the ones in my set, yet I was sure I was not missing any cups. "I don't understand how this got here. I don't even remember leaving it here." I continued to inspect the teacup. "When did this get here?" "You brought it to me when you were alive, but I was unable to ask your wish before your death." The air rushed out of my body just as the teacup crashed against the shrine after my hands lost their grip. I stared into the ghost's face in utter disbelief and raced back to the house. Shaking and frightened at the impossible idea of me being a ghost, I raced inside the house only to find myself lying on the kitchen floor with the tea leaves and cold water scattered on the ground. So that's a story written about a Japanese ghost. And I was wondering, is it similar to ones that you've heard before, or is it very different? Anyway, thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the ghost stories. Maybe even made you a little scared, who knows?
Thank you. Those were great. Yeah, that was a little bit scary. So yeah, first of all, while you were talking, one of the students made the comment in Japanese, "Obake ga kowaso," like these ghosts are a little bit scary. And then another student said, "Your voice is very nice. It feels as if a ghost is right beside me. Have you ever seen a ghost?"
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't actually seen one, but there certainly have been times when I have felt a cold wind blowing through me, or some noises when there couldn't possibly be anybody there, things like that. I do enjoy going to places that are supposed to be haunted to see if I can feel anything or experience anything. I love going on ghost walks when I go to new cities. They're great fun as well.
Great.
But
So you're
no,
definitely not scared.
I think there's a difference. I think there's two kinds of ghosts. There's ones that are just repeating their deaths over and over and over because they haven't finished with it. There's something that's tying them to this world that, yeah, they're not done with it yet. You know, they still, so they just keep repeating it over and over again. But there are some ghosts that can see you, and those would scare me. Really scare me. You know, they come to your bed and they're actually staring into your eyes. It's like, okay, what do you want?
But now we know offering tea might be.
Offering tea works, yeah, except then he tells you you're already dead. Yes, that's great.
I mean, that's a special circumstance, maybe.
Mhm.
So the student Tsukikusa, again, sorry, I might have forgotten mentioning some of your names, dear students. I'm kind of mixed when I read it, so sorry if I say some names and I don't others. Wonderful ghost story marathon. Did you used to tell or be told ghost stories in this scary season? And yeah, I also wanted to ask that, when are ghost stories usually told?
Well, ghost stories have to do with winter anyway. I mean, Halloween is not specifically, I mean, ghost stories are not limited just to Halloween, but it is the perfect time for it because, as Amy said, you know, it's the time when the veil between worlds is very thin. So it's a time when you would expect to see ghosts. And so it's good to be reminded of them, that they are around and that we should be respectful of them, you know, in case otherwise they come and haunt you. And that's not going to be good fun. But no, I think anytime you have a fire, anytime you have, you know, cold nights and sitting around with friends, it's a great time for telling stories there.
Definitely. I might be wrong about this. Maybe Amy, you know this as well, but in Japan, it's kind of the opposite. It's not the winter, it's the summer, because the chill you get from it is nice to have in the summer, kind of. That's the idea, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And then you'll see also in like the summertime, you'll see a lot more of like ghost movies. I don't want to say like movies, like it's like not Hollywood, but you'll see those kinds of movies on TV during that season as well.
So yeah, both logic kind of makes sense, right? In the winter when you're already like huddled all together and it's cold outside, you want to maybe be a bit scared, but also in the summer, if the nights are warm and you want a bit of a cool chill, then it might be good to tell a scary story as well. And oh, we got another question. Sorry, very simple question. Says the student, do you like horror stories?
I get nightmares if they're really terrible horror stories, especially if I hear them late at night. So yeah, there's a limit as to how much horror I can have in the story. But yeah,
For
ghost
sure.
stories, definitely.
They're fun, yeah. One thing I was just wondering about, especially during the first story, was how so often in ghost stories they're about young women who have been like wronged in some way or had a tragic death. And so I just thought, like, was that just like the bad feelings of the people around them who like wronged them and thought like, I'm probably gonna get haunted. Like, it's interesting.
It is. I wonder also if it could be tied to the fact that women didn't often have any other recourse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they couldn't, fight a duel, take somebody to court, whatever, so the only thing they could do was to haunt you once they were dead.
Right.
To make you
Haunt
regret your
after death, and
actions.
if they're still alive, they could poison you. So
Yeah.
both seem a bit related. Yeah. Nice. Let's see if we got any other questions. No, I think that's it. Okay. Yeah, I loved both of these, like learning about kind of how Halloween is now in the US and then hearing these lovely, scary stories. So thank you both very much for sharing that with us. For Amy, from you, we've already heard a little bit about the lessons you teach on Cafe Talk. Alison, do you want to mention any specific lesson that students should check out?
Yes. Please do come over to Cafe Talk and have a look at what I'm offering. I'm a new tutor here, so you may not have seen my lessons before. I have quite a wide range, and I'm very happy to make a lesson to fit whatever you want. I can do advanced grammar, I can do simple grammar, I can do conversations, but I can also do editing. I've done a lot of editing of scientific articles and doctoral theses. So I can also teach you about that, or I can edit your papers for you if you want. And also interview prep is another thing that I'm good at. So if you are planning on looking for a new job or whatever and want some practice, that's another thing I'd be lovely to have you help you with. Looking
Great,
forward
thank you
to
very
hearing
much.
from you all.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the students should definitely check out both of your lessons. We got one more question I just saw. The question is, I know you have lots of ghost stories in the UK, which are very popular. You said you like to join. Are they scary or fun to experience those events? So I think that's about going on ghost tours in new towns.
Yeah. Well, for example, I went on the Jack the Ripper tour in London. So it's not just the UK, but that is one that I came to mind. And on that tour, you do go around the places where Jack the Ripper was leaving the bodies, and the person was beautifully dressed up in the 19th century costumes and had a lovely voice anyway, but then explaining exactly what happened and where it happened and what the body looked like and how all the police were completely mystified because there was, for example, the police in those days, they would make a tour of the neighborhood. So they would just walk all night round and round and round the houses. And in between one tour of the houses, which is like 5-10 minutes, Jack the Ripper had managed to bring a body, put it down, slash it open and disappear, things like that. And so there was one woman on the tour and she said, "Oh, this is way too scary." And so the guide said, "Well, this is a Jack the Ripper tour,
Yeah, you signed
You're
up
not
for
willing
this.
to be scared. It's a bit of a wrong place to be." So I think it depends on who's doing it, but most of the tour guides that I've met, they really put their emotions into the story and they really give you a chance to have a thrill running down your back, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
That must be such a fun job to do.
Definitely. I would love to do that. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think we've read all of the questions. So thank you all very much for watching and for asking your questions. If you do have more questions, please check out both of the tutors' lessons and you can ask more questions there, or studies about something else with them. And please also check out the other Halloween themed events that we have in the campaign. And if you take the lesson before the end of the month, you'll get the badge. So don't forget doing that as well. はい、今日は皆さん参加していただきありがとうございました。まだまだ10月終わってないので、もしよかったらハロウィンレッスンを受講して、バッジももらってください。そしてもし何か追加の質問とかあれば、お二人の講師のレッスンを申し込んで、そのレッスンの途中にぜひ聞いてください。では、今日はありがとうございました。Thank you all so much for watching. Have a lovely evening and maybe a bit of a scary one. Goodbye.
Yes, have a lovely time.